1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are with us here on the program. We are back in the DFS lab. As always, it's presented by 1 week season, where we build a lineup on DraftKings and then use that as a way to talk through the upcoming, in this case, week 16 slate. I'm your host, Cheeseman, and as always, pleasure to be welcoming up Hilow. Hilow, thoughts on week 15? How did it turn out for you as we look back on another, as always, an interesting week?
Yeah, we had some really great calls over at 1 week season. We were talking about it beforehand, but we saw Josh Allen and that the Bills and the Lions game as obviously the clear and away top game environment on the slate. It was talked about a lot last week, but I felt the field was going to be looking at that game kind of wrong, so to speak. So like we figured it would get more ownership than projections, but we recommended a Josh Allen naked with a Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown bring back on the other side. The thesis being, like, Josh he's taken over the last month of play, right? But he has still required the opposition to be pushing him in order to do so, just based on the coaching staff. And, we saw the offensive coordinator change last year. Like this year, they've been much more kind of follow the punches, go with the flow of the game. And in order for them to kind of like, we're looking to unlock superhero Josh, right? If we're playing him. And the way to do
Hulk
so is
smash mode.
Yeah, Hulk smash mode, I think, is the way that we put it on the Slate podcast. So my thesis was attacking Josh Allen through the Lions. We kind of ran good with Dave Montgomery going down, but Jahmyr Gibbs was kind of the lightning, right? In that, the Sonic, I think he's called, in that equation. So like, we're looking for splash plays. We're looking for guys that can create on their own. And that was Jahmyr Gibbs. So, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown was kind of the natural, like, matchup driven, where we expected like the volume to flow, because the Bills, they play a lot of off coverage. They're looking to filter things to the middle of the field where they can rally around the football. And yeah, we kind of saw that play out. There were some other good calls we had last week. My personal, I didn't have a lot of time last week, so I had a house closing. I was helping my mom buy a house, and it went to shit like on Tuesday. So it kind of took up a lot of my time through the meat and potatoes of the week. I only played like 5 rosters myself. But we had some good calls on that slate, and we figured that it was a slate where you're likely to need 215, 220 points to win. So kind of nailed that as well. Looking forward to this slate, though. It's another, let's see, we got 11 games because there's 2 on Saturday this week. And then we have the standard Thursday night football, and we have the standard Monday night football. So those 2 games on the Thursday slate, on the Saturday slate, have a lot of teams that we're typically looking to attack. The Ravens are there, the Chiefs are there, not necessarily looking to attack them as much this season, but the Texans are there. And the Steelers, that's a very interesting game because it's effectively playing for the division lead. The Steelers do hold the tiebreaker as of right now over the Ravens, but if the Ravens win, they have an equal record with 2 games to play. So now we're talking about home games versus road games. We're talking about wild card versus division title. So that's a very big game that we could see George Pickens come back and really take that game environment to another level. We also have the Packers are off the main slate. The Bucks are off the main slate. They're typically a team we're looking to target their game environments. So when we look at this slate, like, it's an 11-game slate, but we don't necessarily have, like, the Bills are playing the Patriots. Like, we don't necessarily have a lot of solid game environments. The Giants are on the slate. They're playing the Falcons, a Falcons team that is really, really, really looking bad on offense. That last night was terrible. But so all of that to say, like, even though it's an 11-game slate, we're kind of back to tight pricing. We're back to like not a lot of great game environments. So we're probably going to see like 195 to 205, if I had to guess, ship majors. And that's going to kind of be our starting point here. Another interesting aspect about the slate is the 555 MILLY is back. So we'll be attacking that. We'll be attacking that on our build here.
Love it, dude. Love it. And just as a kind of a reminder for the watchers, the listeners, in the 555 milli, like you've said, your style of play, you typically build 3 to 5 lineups. How different are you like trying to get? Like, how much do you balance like using things like leverage versus like not getting so different that it's almost like getting too contrarian, so to speak?
There's a lot that goes into that. Typically, we see smaller fields have higher chalk rates. Typically, we see higher dollar contests have higher chalk rates because the players in those contests are much better at identifying like the top on paper plays. So all of that kind of goes into this equation where we're looking to manipulate leverage. And that's what it comes down to. Like getting into like the macro discussion of that, we have to understand that like what we're trying to do in DFS goes so much further beyond just picking the good plays because the payouts are not linear. So like in cash games, it like ownership does not matter because the payouts are linear. It is you win, this guy loses. It is a zero-sum game effectively. When we're looking at GPPs, we have to understand that the payout tables are fairly logarithmic. And when you get to the higher tier in that payout table, you win so much more when you're right. From a theoretical sense, that effectively means that we must be okay and actually seek out embracing more variance because the payoff is that much greater when we're right. So in the Millie Maker, in the 555 Millie Maker, our plan of attack is much different than if we're, say, playing like the double spy, which is like 800 entries.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of that kind of comes down to our knowledge of the game itself, our knowledge of the prescribed contest rules, which everybody is abiding by, which includes the payout tables, and our observations of the field. So we bring all that in together, and this is kind of like macro discussion of what game theory is and what we're looking to do here. We bring all of that in, and we base like our observations of the field off of these known like theoretically optimal principles that we play DFS by. So it's all a game of managing and manipulating variance, and that's kind of much more important than just saying like I know football and I can pick the best plays on the slate, because now that kind of leads us into this discussion that we had in depth at OWS last weekend on Saturday on the Slate podcast, where it becomes this like changing dynamics of DFS now, and what has kind of brought along this change in macro of DFS are things like solvers, are things like what we call them like projection systems or optimizers. And it's I liken where we are right now in DFS to kind of the introduction of solvers in poker, where it first was like this dance. Like poker used to be this beautiful dance, right? It was this beautiful dance of outmaneuvering your opponent, and like the two hole cards that you had, like they mattered, but like we're looking to, it was primarily a game of exploitations, which is I'm exploiting my opponents based on node tendencies or my observations of their play. And our two hole cards like mattered a little bit less than they do over the last 15 years since the introduction of these solvers. And that kind of brought along this idea, this tool which is called game theory optimal in poker. And what that effectively does is we know that poker is a combinatorial game with borderline infinite potential outcomes, which effectively means like if you just shuffle a deck of cards, and we use this example on the slate to highlight this, if you shuffle a deck of cards, the number of outcomes of the order of the cards on a 52 card playing deck is effectively on the order of 1 to the 10 or 1 times 10 to the 68th power. So mathematically speaking, it is more likely in the history of poker, since we've been playing this back to the 1800s, it's mathematically probable that no two shuffles of a deck of cards have ever been the same.
That's insane.
So now we haven't even dealt the cards yet, and we're already in this borderline infinite potential outcome game. So all of that, what the solvers do is they take simulations and you input like actions and variables that have already taken place. So your 2-hole cards, the action leading up to where you're at in the hand. It could be the flop. It could be previous actions from other players. It could be all these different variables. You input those, it simulates it, and it spits out your spread of optimal moves on your next action.
Wow.
So
I'm not a huge poker player. I play for fun, but I did not realize that was that was a thing now.
Yeah, it's called Game Theory Optimal. It's been around for almost a decade now, or maybe a little bit more. And
so you're using, like, you can use these when you're playing in like a tournament, for example?
Yeah, tournaments, cash games, it matters not. The theoretics change a little bit because the payoffs are different, obviously. In tournaments, you're looking to accumulate chips, and the goal is to get all of the chips because, again, it's logarithmic payouts. In cash games, it's more confined to the hand that you're playing and the previous actions known. So, like, all of that to say, one of the assumptions of Game Theory Optimal is that everyone else is also playing optimally. That's one of the assumptions that it bases its conclusions off of, and one of the variables that is input. So all of that to say, there are still exploits that you can make because not everybody is playing optimally. If you port that now to DFS, it's a similar discussion. We're seeing a higher percentage of the field utilizing things like projection systems and optimizers. And what that is effectively those are tools that are effectively similar to a solver in poker. So it is one of those assumptions is that everybody else that you are playing against in the field is also utilizing those tools. So now we're in this age, and I liken it to the Game Theory Optimal boom, a decade ago in poker. We're in this age where we are seeing the field adept at identifying the best plays on paper. Where's that coming from? It's this heavier reliance on projections and on optimizers that are taking those inputs and effectively giving us the best on paper plays. It's no longer knowing ball, it's knowing how to manipulate variance. So with that understanding, we have a more clear picture now of like where the field is going prior to the start of a slate. And it becomes that much clearer now how we can manipulate variance in our favor to create those what we call exploitations or exploits, which is effectively a move away from optimal that is designed to give us a boost in expected value that is greater than the value lost, or the expected value lost from the deviation itself. So to put that in layman's terms, we have these optimal, like proven practices in DFS that these are the optimal ways to approach to manipulate variance in our favor. If we move away from that, anytime we make a deviation, which is a move away from optimal theory, we are taking on a hit in expected value. So the goal of a deviation or an exploit, which is effectively a deviation designed to generate a boost to expected value, the goal is for that boost in expected value to be more than the value lost from the deviation itself.
Yes.
That is like the PhD theoretical realm of like what we're trying to do in DFS. We're trying to make these exploits that are generating a boost in expected value to give us an edge on the field. So now that like picture becomes a little clearer now that we have the field's reliance on like these projection systems and these optimizers. Now that the field's reliance on them is so much greater, it becomes actually easier to make those exploits. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. And
yes.
we identified that early on in the season, at 1 week season, like, hey, the chalk is chalkier this season. The pricing is tighter. The approach that the field is likeliest to use as far as salary allocation goes is likely to be that much more clear. So now like layering that into the discussion that we've had about like what we're trying to do in DFS and where DFS is right now, we have this kind of blueprint that the field is giving us each week. And we've taken we observed those field tendencies very early in the season, like week 2, week 3. And now we've kind of built our hypotheses about how we're going to attack the field this season. And now we're at this point in the season where we've had a significant amount of data where we can fact check our hypothesis, and it turned out to be true and accurate. So that's kind of where we're at in the season right now from a theoretical sense, is like we've made these hypotheses, we fact checked them over the last 10 weeks, and now we're sitting here in week 16 and we're like, okay, like we were right in week 2 and week 3. And this is how we've built like our boost to expected value over the last 2.5, 3 months. So it's just a discussion on like where DFS has been, where it is now, and moving forward, like how do we attack it in the most profitable way?
Absolutely. No, that is great stuff, dude. And I love it how the phrase you use, manipulating variance. I think on the slate you said it like one of the ways is stacking a game environment. That way you like make it so that like there's less things you have to get right. By that, you're manipulating like all the different outcomes you could have. If this one outcome goes correctly, then you have 2 or 3 pieces from it. So, but I like that.
Yeah.
That word picture helps me a ton. Manipulating variance.
Yeah, and if you look at like this, just the slate, and compare it to like the potential outcomes in poker, which we know are borderline infinite. If we look at like a 13 game slate like we had last weekend, the number of outcomes of the game is defined by the number of positions that we need to fill a roster, which is 9. And if you just go by position, quarterbacks, if there's 13 game slate, that means there's 26 quarterbacks that we can decide from that one position. Multiply that by now, like we'll just use tight end, the other onesie position. If we want to say there's 26 teams on a slate, there's maybe 30 tight ends that are viable on that slate. So just the potential outcomes of quarterback plus tight end pairings on a slate is 26 times 30. That's 2 of our 9 positions. Multiply that by 36 running backs times 36 again for the second running back position times like almost 50 wide receivers.
Insane amount.
Times 50 times 50. Yeah. So that is the number of potential outcomes on a 13 game slate, as in how do we build a roster? Now it's going to be a little bit less than the actual number that we get by multiplying like that because of salary constraints, but that is a way to visualize the total number of outcomes. And there is one outcome in that massive number that is going to be optimal on a given week, which is the optimal combination of using our salary to maximize points. If we look at the history of DFS, which is, I think it was 2012, I think, is when DFS started. So like 14 years or 12 years of DFS, which is like, we'll say 17 main slates if we average it, because we used to have 17 weeks, a little bit over 17 main slates times the 12 years. We've had about 100 of these iterations of main slates. Not once out of all the Millie Maker contests and all the contests in DFS and across all the major sites, not once has an optimal roster won a tournament. It's really, really fucking hard to find that one combination out of the borderline infinite potential outcomes that there are in a given week. So all of that means, like, if we are embracing the maximum amount of variance in a given week, we are looking for optimal. We're looking for the optimal roster. And what is that likely to include is like, it's not going to have team stacks, and it's not going to have like these correlations. It's very often that we see the optimal roster just be this assortment of 9 random players.
Yeah.
It's really, really fucking hard to win like that because of the sheer number of combinations. That's why we have these practices, and what we're doing when we're team stacking, when we're game stacking, when we're correlating, is we are reducing the variance by doing that. So it gives us fewer variables and fewer things that need to go right in order to win. And that's effectively what we talk about, is like, these are optimal practices. Like if we had 1 million entries in a contest, like say the Millie Maker was like a $1 entry, there were like 10 million entries in it, which is effectively the prize pool that we're working with most times. Well, it's in this year, it's like a 2.5 milli prize pool in the Millie Maker, which is horrible. For 40% of the prize pool to go to first place. But if we had like a $10 million entry tournament with a $1 entry, so there's 10 million entries, and we ran that over the last 12 years, 17 times a season, we, mathematically speaking, we should have like an optimal roster ship a tournament. So we would need to build rosters a lot differently than we do now. But we don't have that. We have the number of combinations that we have to beat. And again, this isn't a game where we're seeking optimal. It's a game where we're looking to beat everybody else.
Right.
So that's a very distinct, like a very unique distinction that we have to make here is like we're not hunting for optimal. So we have these practices that we use to reduce variance, to manipulate variance in our favor, to manage variance, and with the goal of beating everybody else, because we're not playing against a computer, which if a computer ran this, it would find an optimal roster because it would run an infinite number of simulations.
Yeah.
So that's a very like deep, like game theory level discussion. We're already at 20 minutes. But these are the things, that are like dictating and guiding our decision-making processes in DFS. It's not just like picking best players or like attacking the game environment with the highest game total. There's like so many unique and intricate dynamics of this game that we're looking to do. And a big part of that is these observations of the field. So that'll kind of get us in. We'll make a real quick roster build after that.
Oh yeah, that's great stuff. Yeah. Where do you want to start here? I mean, you got, like you said, there's not a ton of just amazingly great game environments. Is there like an offense that
the game environment I want to attack is the Browns and the Bengals.
Love it.
Two teams that are top 5 in pass rate over expectation, pass attempts per game. Obviously with Jameis Winston under center, are now playing each other. So this is a spot where very clearly to me is the top expected game environment on the slate. Like there are teams with higher team totals than the Bengals at 27.5, like the Bills at 30.5. But the concentration of these two offenses, the pass heavy nature, we're going to start there. And we'll start it with Jameis to kind of get some value. Yeah,
totally. As long as he can stay in the game, and Cincinnati, with the combination of how bad their defense has been, I love that play.
Yeah. So, and it'll depend on the status of David Njoku. They are hopeful that he will suit up. Obviously, he missed last week, and we talked about on the Slate podcast how the absence of Cedric Tillman, the absence of David Njoku, could just make the Bills like structurally fail. And it did, or not the Bills, the Browns, structurally fail.
Totally.
And it did. Why is that? It's like David Njoku is such a massive red zone option in this offense. You look at the 6 games that David Njoku has had with a healthy Jameis Winston under center. David Njoku has seen 7 end zone targets. The next closest player on the team was 2. So he is a very, very big red zone option. They are now going to be without Nick Chubb, who broke his foot. There's a lot of uncertainty with Cedric Tillman. Is he going to clear protocol? He still hasn't cleared protocol 3 weeks after his concussion. And we have David Njoku with his hamstring issue. So what I want to do here is we're going to make a non-standard kind of primary stack, and we're going to include Jerome Ford with Jameis.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. I thought about Ford a little bit earlier.
And then we're going to also add Jerry Jeudy and Jamar Chase.
Got it. All right. Yeah. Primary stack there. And you got some value, obviously. So 4,800 left to player.
We're going to add Jahmyr Gibbs just because, he's very clearly one of the top on paper plays in the slate.
No doubt.
We've been talking all season how, like, if I could just have this backfield in one guy, I would play it every week. We have that now.
Now we have it, yeah.
And we have coach speak from Dan Campbell that's like, hey, we need to be smart with Jahmyr Gibbs because they want that, like, explosiveness. You're probably going to see a dip in efficiency metrics if they run Jahmyr Gibbs 25 times and give him 5 targets for like 30 opportunities. So I don't know where his workload is going to end this week, but it's a nuts on paper matchup against the Bears to where it like kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, and Detroit doesn't have the luxury of like, relaxing. They still have to keep winning to keep, pacing that NFC North.
Yeah, I mean there are like not just the NFC North, but the NFC. There are now 3 teams that are
Eagles
12-2.
And, that's
the Eagles as well. So there are 3 teams that are 12-2. They're all playing for the 1 bye for the final 3 weeks. So it should be fun stuff. Yeah, so we'll enter Jahmyr Gibbs there. Now we have 4,100. So we already kind of know we need a value-esque tight end. That becomes a little bit less fun because there are 3 tight ends at the top here in player pricing that can put the slate out of reach. Brock Bowers, hopefully getting Aiden O'Connell back. Trey McBride against the Panthers, who are getting dusted by tight ends. And they actually tried to scheme Trey McBride a touchdown. They threw him a pass from the 1 and he didn't get in. He caught it and got tackled. It's like, man, can this guy score a receiving touchdown? And then George Kittle
like, in his contract or something, like missing out on like incentives. $2 million.
Yeah.
And George Kittle
can put a slate out of reach. But we're going to need to save some salary, and we're probably going to have to do that at tight end and defense. Because of this build. So let's see. Yeah, this is tough. Let's go to defense real quick. Let's let that simmer. The Titans are interesting at 26 against the Colts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Let's put them in and see what we got. 46 per player. So we're still going to save some salary. If we save some salary at tight end, we'll probably have about $5K remaining per player at wide receiver. Let's go. Let's shift gears here. Let's put DJ Moore in at 5,700.
Okay. All right. So yeah, 4K left.
Let's go Jalen Coker at 4,200. So what was interesting about Coker is he missed 5 games, came back, or 4 games. Came back last week, and last week was the first game all season in which both Jalen Coker and Adam Thielen were on the field together. And I had a lot of concern with Coker because he was effectively a slot-only guy, and that's Adam Thielen's role in the lineup. But then Jalen Coker came back last week, again, the first game with both of them healthy, and he played the highest snap rate on the team and ran 50% of his routes from the slot still. So that, to me, with this team playing so much better, Jalen Coker is viable at only 4,200. Like, he saw his price come up, but it was only $500 in salary. And he went 110 and 1 on 4 receptions. So with this offense playing so much better, I think Coker is a viable salary saver here this week.
So that gives us 3,900. Ertz, Kmet, Noah Fant. I mean, looking down the line, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
The strange 12 targets last week, but I mean, that's just kind of he had nothing before that, so it's hard to really view that as predictive.
Let's go Chig Okonkwo. And then let's go Eagles defense. I don't necessarily love that, but where are the Vikings? The Vikings at 35. We need 400 to get to the Vikings. Let's you know what? Let's remove Judy and we'll put in Tillman.
Okay, there we go. So now we got a lot.
And that'll give us Vikings, and then we have like a bunch for tight end now, and then we'll go Hawkinson. Boom.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. So there it is. That's the lineup we landed on. For those of you listening on the podcast, Jameis Winston at quarterback with what's his first name again? Jerome Ford. I wanted to say Jameer Ford. Jameer Gibbs, Cedric Tillman, Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Hawkinson, Coker, and the Vikings defense. Great stuff as always, Hilow. Anything you want to add before we ship this one out?
No, man, that was a lot. You might have to listen to that back for those not familiar with game theory and kind of the theoretics behind it. But definitely do that because game theory is beautiful. Love it.
It is, dude. It is, and it's really the key. It's the key to DFS. Hilow, great stuff as always, man. Good luck for the upcoming Week 16, and we'll catch you next time.
See you, boys.